March 2025. A rural road outside Anderson County, South Carolina. It's late, the kind of late where headlights are the only thing cutting through the dark. A DoorDash driver named Jimmy Allen Ramey is making his rounds, dropping off takeout to hungry families and late-night shift workers. It's supposed to be just another night, routine, quiet, forgettable. But then something strange happens. In the early hours, Ramey stops answering calls. His phone pings once more in Anderson, and then it goes silent. Later that day, his red Honda Civic is seen on the road, still moving. But behind the wheel isn't Jimmy. It's someone else, a stranger. That stranger is later identified as Daeshawn Marquize Wilson, a man with a criminal history, caught hours away in Georgia, driving Jimmy Ramey's car like it was his own. And as for Jimmy, he's gone. What follows is a disturbing unraveling of small-town mystery, one that starts with fast food and ends on a stretch of rural property linked to Wilson's own family. Welcome to Story Room by Rico. Subscribe and hit the bell. Share where you're watching from in the comments. To understand how a simple food delivery turned into a homicide case with national implications, we need to go back to the last day Jimmy Ramey was seen alive. Jimmy Allen Ramey was 31 years old. Not famous, not flashy. Just a hard-working guy trying to stay afloat. He worked multiple jobs, but DoorDash had become his main hustle, a flexible gig that paid the bills and gave him breathing room. Friends described him as low-key. He wasn't loud. He wasn't trouble. He kept to himself, but he cared about his community. He always tipped when he picked up food. He always texted customers if he was going to be late. He lived in Anderson County, a patchwork of farmland, suburbs, and sleepy roads. The kind of place where you might still find porch lights on at midnight, where everybody kind of knows everybody, or at least knows somebody who does. On the night of March 17th, Jimmy was working a typical route. There were no red flags. He picked up orders, delivered them, and then, sometime after midnight, he vanished. When his friends couldn't reach him, they weren't immediately alarmed. Jimmy worked odd hours. Maybe he crashed at someone's place. Maybe his phone died. But by morning, that unease started to bloom into fear. The next day, police were alerted. Friends and family filed missing person reports. A bolo was issued, but it wasn't the cops who made the next move. It was Jimmy's car, a red Honda Civic turned up in Georgia. Not abandoned, not wrecked, but rolling down the road with someone else behind the wheel. And that someone was about to lead authorities down a trail no one in Anderson County was ready for. Next up, who was Daeshawn Marquize Wilson? And what was he doing in Jimmy Ramey's car? Daeshawn Marquize Wilson wasn't supposed to be in South Carolina. At least, not legally. He was already on law enforcement's radar in parts of Georgia, linked to prior arrests ranging from theft to drug possession. Not a household name, but known enough in the system to raise flags when he popped up somewhere new. So when Georgia police spotted Jimmy Ramey's red Honda Civic drifting through a quiet neighborhood, with Wilson behind the wheel, the situation escalated quickly. Wilson didn't resist. He didn't run. He acted calm, almost too calm. The arresting officers said he had an eerie stillness to him, like someone who knew how to play the game. But the plates didn't lie. The car was registered to Jimmy Allen Ramey. And when they checked inside, they found evidence that tied it to more than just a borrowed ride. A DoorDash bag still in the back seat. Jimmy's hoodie balled up in the floorboard. And worst of all, no sign of Jimmy. When questioned, Wilson gave vague answers. Claimed he didn't know the guy. Claimed he bought the car. But nothing lined up. And then came the twist that tied the whole thing together. The location of Jimmy's body. Found on property owned by someone linked to Wilson. What started as a missing person case quickly spiraled into a full-blown homicide investigation. But who exactly was Daeshawn Marquize Wilson? And what brought him across state lines into Jimmy Ramey's world? To answer that, stay tuned. Subscribe to Story Room by Rico, because we need to dig deeper into Wilson's past and how it may have been more connected to Anderson County than anyone realized. Digging into Daeshawn Marquize Wilson's background revealed a mosaic of chaos, brief stints in jail, failed attempts at rehabilitation, and a revolving door of petty crime. But beyond the rap sheet, there were subtle signs pointing towards something more organized, more deliberate. Wilson had family ties that stretched just over the state line. One cousin, in particular, owned a parcel of wooded land in South Carolina, not far from where Jimmy's body would eventually be discovered. Authorities would later confirm that this relative had no official criminal record, but the land had been the site of previous law enforcement interest. Nothing stuck, but the rumors lingered. Wilson's presence in Anderson County wasn't random. Phone records, toll booth footage, and surveillance snapshots placed him in the area multiple times in the weeks leading up to March 17th. He wasn't there sightseeing. He was laying groundwork. Investigators suspect Wilson was involved in something larger, possibly a small network trafficking in stolen vehicles, burner phones, or even gig worker account fraud. But hard proof was scarce. He didn't leave much behind. What little they found was digital, fragmented, and deliberately concealed. As they interviewed his former associates, a pattern emerged. Wilson had a way of latching onto people who worked alone, those on the fringes of the system. People like Jimmy, who made his living out of his car, carrying cash, working late, usually without backup. Easy targets. The timeline grew tighter. 2 days before Jimmy disappeared, Wilson was seen at a gas station near the county line. Same hoodie, same shoes. He paid in cash and didn't speak to anyone. Surveillance caught him scanning license plates in the lot. Looking, calculating. By the time investigators connected these dots, the scene on that rural property had already shifted from missing person to confirmed homicide. The land was cordoned off. Forensics teams combed every inch. And Wilson? He was already in custody, answering every question with a shrug. But his silence didn't erase the pattern. It confirmed it. The next step would force Anderson County and Jimmy's family to face the darkest chapter yet. Coming up, the discovery that turned a quiet investigation into a statewide headline. The search team moved methodically, eyes low, boots sinking into soft earth. The land they were scouring wasn't vast, but it was dense, brambled edges, twisted brush, and uneven ground. Located off a quiet stretch outside Belton, the property didn't appear threatening. It was the kind of place you'd pass without notice. But on that day, it became the focus of a grim turning point. They found him near a creek, partially concealed by fallen leaves and natural debris. Not buried, not hidden well. Almost as if whoever left him there wanted him to be found eventually, but not too soon. The medical examiner arrived before sundown. Forensic technicians followed, carefully photographing the area before placing markers around the site. Nearby, tucked behind a pile of discarded timber, investigators located items believed to have belonged to Jimmy: a worn wallet, his phone, and an empty takeout container. Word traveled fast. Within hours, local news stations parked their vans near the entrance to the property. Yellow tape stretched across trees. A drone hovered above. Strangers began to show up, some out of curiosity, others to offer prayers. The sheriff's department confirmed what many feared. The remains were identified as Jimmy Allen Ramey through dental records. The announcement was delivered in a somber press conference that evening. Flashbulbs popped. Reporters whispered. But no one spoke louder than the silence in the background, the weight of confirmation. Jimmy's mother was not present at the briefing. According to family friends, she had already known. She had felt it days before the news broke. Her son's disappearance had never felt like a delay or a detour. It had felt final. Back on the property, the recovery stretched into the night. Floodlights lit the terrain as crime scene teams continued to extract any potential evidence. Every boot print, every fiber, every trace was recorded. The investigators were quiet, focused, not because of protocol, but out of respect. This wasn't just a crime scene. It was someone's ending. From that moment forward, the case against Daeshawn Wilson moved into a new phase, one marked not by speculation, but by the gravity of proof. Next, what happens when justice begins to move, and what it costs the people left behind. If you're still watching, you need to subscribe. The days following the recovery saw a shift in tone, from quiet dread to public urgency. Anderson County had seen its share of tragedies, but this one struck a nerve. A man doing honest work, taken in the course of his daily routine. It wasn't just senseless. It felt personal. Prosecutors wasted no time. Within 48 hours, charges were filed against Daeshawn Marquize Wilson. Kidnapping, murder, interstate theft. The list grew as investigators dug deeper into his movements and behavior before and after Jimmy's disappearance. Bail was denied. The courtroom was packed. During arraignment, Wilson appeared expressionless. His attorney spoke for him. No plea was entered that day. Outside, reporters scrambled for comment, while neighbors and community leaders held vigils across town. One banner at a candlelight service read, "Justice for Jimmy, no more waiting." The legal path ahead was steep. Prosecutors prepared a case built on digital records, eyewitness testimony, GPS tracking, and forensic evidence from the crime scene. No weapon had been recovered, but circumstantial proof painted a compelling narrative. Meanwhile, Jimmy's loved ones became advocates. His sister gave interviews, urging others in gig work to remain vigilant. His high school friends organized fundraisers to support legal expenses and create a memorial scholarship. What began as grief turned slowly into resolve. In the media, the story took hold. True crime podcasts featured it. Hashtag spread on social media. People far outside South Carolina began sharing the case, shocked by its randomness, and by the idea that someone could vanish in the middle of a routine job. At a town council meeting, a community member stood and asked, "How many more will it take before we start protecting people who deliver to our doorsteps every day?" In response, a local legislator drafted what would be called Ramey's Law, a proposal aimed at increasing safety protocols and accountability for delivery drivers in high-risk zones. Yet amid all this movement, one thing remained clear: justice would be slow. Trials take time. Evidence must be scrutinized. Motives explored. But for Jimmy's family, the goal wasn't speed. It was certainty. And while the gears of prosecution turned, another question loomed in the background. Why Jimmy? Why that night? And was this part of something bigger than anyone had realized? Next, the theories that still hang in the air, and the answers that may never come. In cases like this, justice rarely tells the whole story. Even with charges filed and timelines reconstructed, what lingers are the gaps, the unexplained, the speculative, the pieces that never quite fit. Why Jimmy became the target remains a point of speculation. Authorities couldn't tie him to any prior connection with Wilson. No shared acquaintances. No dates. No disputes. Just a seemingly random encounter between two people from different worlds that intersected for reasons no one could explain. Some theorized that Jimmy may have witnessed something he shouldn't have, that his late-night route crossed paths with an ongoing crime or a private transaction gone wrong. Others believe Wilson had been scouting for a target, someone alone, mobile, and unprotected. Then there were the online sleuths. YouTube channels dissected the case frame by frame. A few suggested a possible tie to a string of robberies targeting food delivery drivers in nearby counties. No concrete link was ever established, but the coincidence added weight to the idea that this wasn't an isolated act. The timing also raised eyebrows. Wilson had arrived in Anderson County only days before the incident. The fact that Jimmy disappeared so soon after suggested more than a chance encounter. But if there was a motive, it never surfaced. No confession, no final word from Wilson. The family was left to fill in the blanks with their own intuition. Some said Jimmy's instinct to help others may have put him in harm's way, that he could have been lured under false pretenses, a phony order, a staged emergency, a fabricated address. Despite the evidence collected, much remained shrouded. Investigators never found surveillance footage of the moment of abduction. No eyewitness ever stepped forward to describe what they saw. It was as though the most important moments happened just outside the camera's reach, just beyond the frame. And then there's the matter of silence. Wilson never gave a reason, never uttered a word to shed light on the why. His court appearances remained cold and mechanical, each one closing the door on further understanding. For the Ramey family, that silence may be the hardest truth of all. Next, what closure looks like when final answers never come, and how a family moves forward with only memory to guide them. There comes a point in every tragedy where facts no longer satisfy. The evidence is filed. The suspect is in custody. The press moves on, but for the ones left behind, the story doesn't end. It just changes shape. Jimmy Allen Ramey's family now lives in that space, between remembrance and resilience. His absence is not just a void at the dinner table. It's a shift in how time moves. Birthdays come without laughter. Holidays pass without tradition. And the world, indifferent, keeps spinning. They've built memorials, not statues but habits. A favorite song played in his honor. A seat left empty during Sunday meals. A framed photo near the entryway that gets a glance every morning and a quiet nod every night. Jimmy's name became more than a headline. It became a reminder of how fragile daily life is, of how vulnerability hides in plain sight, even in the most routine moments. The case may find resolution in court, and sentencing may eventually bring a sense of finality. But closure, for many, is a myth. What remains is adaptation. Not moving on, but moving forward with grief in one hand and love in the other. For the town of Anderson County, Jimmy's story left a permanent mark. It reminded a community that safety isn't a given, that justice is a pursuit, not a promise, and that sometimes the people most at risk are the ones we see every day and never think twice about. As for Wilson, the system will decide his fate. But Jimmy's legacy won't be shaped by that verdict. It will live in the quiet choices people now make, the extra care drivers take, the new laws proposed, the parents who now keep a closer eye when their kids start working nights. Not all stories end with answers, but the echo they leave can still shape the world that follows.